The big round room was full of noise and worry. The seats went in circles around a center stage where anyone could stand and talk. 12 different kinds of alien beings sat in their special chairs. Some looked like giant bugs with shiny shells. Others had skin that changed colors when they got upset. A few looked almost like humans, but with extra arms or strange eyes. Ambassador Hyunwoo sat very still in his chair. His black suit was neat and clean. His dark eyes watched everything that happened in the room. Next to him sat Minji, a young woman who kept papers organized on her desk. She wore the same kind of uniform that all humans wore when they came to these big meetings. The war had been going on for 3 long years. 2 big groups of aliens were fighting each other. The Vorthan Empire had millions of soldiers and thousands of big spaceships. The Krellix Federation was just as strong and just as mean. Both sides wanted to control more planets and more star systems. They fought, battle after battle, and never seemed to get tired of killing. Every week more bad news came to the council meetings. Planets were being destroyed. Cities full of innocent people were being bombed. Families were running away from their homes with nothing but the clothes they wore. The refugee ships were packed with scared children and crying parents who did not know where they could go to be safe. Veltar stood up to speak. He was tall and made of something that looked like clear crystal. When light hit him, he sparkled like a diamond. But today his sparkles looked dim and sad. His voice sounded like music, but the words he said were terrible. His people lived on planets where they dug up valuable metals and stones. Last month the war came to their worlds. The Krellix soldiers came first. They said they needed to stop the Vorthans from getting the metals, so they blew up all the mines. They did not care that millions of Veltar's people were still working underground. When the mines exploded, the workers died. The Krellix said it was necessary for winning the war. Then the Vorthan ships arrived. They were angry that the Krellix had destroyed the mines, so they bombed the cities where the mining families lived. They said they were protecting important trade routes, but really they just wanted revenge. The bombs fell for 3 days and 3 nights. When the smoke cleared, there was nothing left but broken rocks, and Ash Veltar's voice got quieter as he told his story. His crystal body stopped sparkling completely. The other aliens in the room looked down at their desks. They had heard stories like this many times before. Everyone knew what was happening, but nobody knew how to stop it. The 2 big empires were too strong and too angry to listen to anyone. One by one other aliens stood up to tell their own sad stories. The Aquilians talked about their beautiful ocean worlds that were now poisoned by chemicals from destroyed spaceships. Fish were dying, and the water was not safe to drink. The Zanari showed pictures of their ancient libraries that had been burned down. Books that were thousands of years old were now just smoke and ashes. Each story was the same. The big empires would come to a planet and demand that the people choose a side. If they said no or tried to stay neutral, both sides would attack them. If they picked the wrong side, the other empire would punish them. There was no way to win, and no way to stay safe. The worst part was that everyone could see the war was getting bigger. Every month it spread to new star systems. Every week more planets were added to the list of places that were too dangerous to visit. The refugee ships were getting more crowded. The medical stations were running out of supplies to help injured people. Yunwoo listened to every word. His face did not show what he was thinking, but his hands were pressed together tightly under the desk. Minji passed him small pieces of paper with new information from Earth. The messages told him things that made his jaw clench, but he did not let anyone see his anger. During the break time, aliens walked around the room in small groups. They whispered to each other about how scared they were. Some talked about giving up and just letting one of the big empires take over their planets. At least then the fighting might stop in their area. Others wondered if they should try to run away to the far edges of the galaxy where the war had not reached yet. A blue-skinned alien woman came over to talk to Hyunwoo. Her name was Ambassador Kira, and her people lived on planets that were very close to the fighting. She told him that 3 of her colonies had already been evacuated. The people were living in crowded ships because they had nowhere else to go. She asked if the humans had any extra space where her people could live. Hyunwoo told her that humans would try to help, but their territory was not very big. Humans only controlled 37 star systems. Most of the other species had hundreds or thousands of systems. The big empires controlled so many planets that nobody could count them all. That was why everyone thought humans were not very important in galactic politics. When the meeting started again, the same useless discussions began. Someone suggested economic sanctions, but both empires were rich enough that it would not hurt them. Someone else wanted to send diplomatic missions, but the Vorthon and Krelix leaders had stopped talking to anyone from the council months ago. A few aliens proposed asking for help from other galaxies, but that would take thousands of years. The Vorthon and Krelix representatives had empty chairs in the meeting room. They used to come and explain why their wars were justified. But now they did not care what anyone else thought. They were too busy planning their next attacks and building bigger weapons. The council meetings had become completely useless for stopping the violence. Hour after hour, the aliens talked in circles. They made the same suggestions they had made last week and the week before. Everyone knew nothing would change, but they kept talking anyway. It was better than admitting they were completely powerless to help their own people, who were dying every day as the sun got lower outside the big windows. Hyunwoo and Minji exchanged quick looks. They both knew that something had to change soon. The galaxy was running out of time. The war was spreading too fast and killing too many innocent people. If someone did not do something brave and dangerous very soon, there might not be any civilizations left to save. The meeting was almost over, and nothing had been accomplished again. Tomorrow there would be more bad news. More planets, destroyed, more families separated, more children who would never see their parents again. The council would meet again and talk in circles while the galaxy burned around them. But Hyunwoo had been getting secret messages from Earth, messages that the other aliens did not know about, messages that might change everything if he was brave enough to act on them. The next few days would determine whether the galaxy had any hope left, or whether everyone would have to watch civilization collapse into chaos and death. Hyunwoo walked through the quiet hallways of the diplomatic station. His footsteps echoed on the metal floors as he made his way to his private rooms. The meeting had ended badly, like all the others, but tonight felt different. Tonight he had important business to take care of, business that could change everything for the human race. His communication room was small, but filled with the most advanced technology Earth could provide. Multiple screens showed star maps and data streams from across the galaxy. A large holographic projector sat in the center, ready to connect him with the leaders back on his home planet. Everything in the room was designed for one purpose: keeping Earth's most important secrets safe. Minji followed him into the room carrying data tablets filled with information they had gathered during the council meeting. She placed them on the desk in a neat row, then activated the security systems that would make sure no one could listen to their conversation. The walls glowed with a soft blue light that meant the room was now completely protected from any kind of spying. The holographic projector came to life with a soft humming sound. President So Young appeared in the center of the room, looking as real as if she was standing right there. Her face was serious and tired from long days of making difficult decisions. Behind her, the familiar sight of Seoul's tall buildings reminded Hyunwoo of everything they were working to protect. President So Young spoke, first asking about the refugee situation. Captain Dong Min had been working day and night to help the displaced aliens who were fleeing from the war zones. Every week, more ships arrived at human space borders, filled with families who had lost everything. The temporary camps were getting crowded, and supplies were running low. The refugees brought terrible stories with them. Stories that made even the toughest human soldiers feel sick to their stomachs. Entire planets had been turned into wastelands, where nothing could live. The Vorthon Empire and Krelix Federation were not just fighting each other anymore. They were deliberately destroying anything that might help their enemies. Including innocent civilians, Hyunwoo reported what he had seen at the council meeting. The other species were becoming more desperate every day. Some were already talking about surrendering to whichever empire reached their territory first. Others were preparing to abandon their homeworlds and flee to distant parts of the galaxy where they might be able to hide. President So Young shared new intelligence that Admiral Taeho had collected from secret missions deep in enemy territory. The news was worse than anyone had expected. Both warring empires were racing to build weapons that could destroy entire star systems in a single attack. They were not satisfied with conquering planets anymore. They wanted the power to eliminate whole civilizations. The weapons were based on technology that could make stars explode or collapse into black holes. If either empire finished building these devices first, they would have the power to threaten every living being in the galaxy. The arms race had gone beyond all reasonable limits, and both sides seemed willing to risk destroying everything to achieve total victory. Captain Ye-Jin joined the conversation from her flagship Sol, which was patrolling the outer edges of human space. Her reports painted a picture of growing panic among the refugee population's entire species were facing extinction as their homeworlds became battlegrounds. Children were growing up in refugee camps without ever seeing their ancestral planets. The most disturbing news came from Intelligence Officer Sung Ho, who had been analyzing communications intercepted from both empires. His data showed that the Vorthon and Krelix leaders were planning to use their new superweapons against major population centers within the next few months. The targets included neutral worlds that had tried to stay out of the conflict. This meant that species like the Altarians and Zanari would be attacked, not because they had chosen a side, but because their continued existence was seen as a potential threat. Both empires had decided that the only way to win the war was to eliminate everyone who might possibly help their enemies in the future. It was a plan for galactic genocide. President So Young listened to all the reports with a face that grew harder and more determined with each piece of bad news. When the briefing was finished, she was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the terrible choice that humanity now faced. They could continue watching from the sidelines while entire civilizations were wiped out, or they could take action. The conversation turned to Earth's unique position in the galactic community. Unlike other species that had evolved on peaceful worlds or expanded gradually through exploration, humans had survived countless wars throughout. Their history, Earth had seen empires rise and fall, world wars that killed millions, and the long struggle to build peace among different peoples. This background gave humans insights that other species could not understand. They knew what it looked like when civilizations were pushed to the breaking point. They recognized the signs of leaders who had become so obsessed with victory that they would destroy everything rather than admit defeat. The galaxy was facing the same kind of madness that had once threatened Earth. General Minho reported on the secret military preparations that had been taking place for months. Human fleets had been quietly positioned in strategic locations throughout the galaxy. New weapons had been developed by combining human engineering with technology learned from studying other species' approaches to warfare. The preparations were more extensive than anyone outside Earth's leadership knew. The discussion revealed that humanity had been planning for this moment since the war began. While other species focused on protecting their own territories, humans had been systematically studying both empires, looking for weaknesses and developing strategies that could be used against them. The analysis showed that both the Vorthon and Krelix forces were not as invincible as they appeared. Their supply lines were overextended across too many star systems. Their populations were growing tired of the endless fighting. Their alliance structures were showing cracks as different factions within each empire disagreed about tactics and objectives. They had been using fear and shock tactics to maintain the illusion of overwhelming strength. But the reality was more complex. President So Young made the decision that would change galactic history. She authorized Hyunwoo to make the announcement that humanity was prepared to enter the war, not to support either existing side but to create a third option based on protecting civilian populations and restoring law and order to the galaxy. It was a decision that required courage most species had never needed to develop. The communication ended with final preparations for what would happen next. Admiral Taeho would reveal the hidden fleets that had been waiting for this moment. Captain Dongmin would shift from refugee operations to coordinated evacuations of threatened populations. General Minho would begin working with allies from smaller civilizations that shared humanity's concerns. Hyunwoo prepared for what would be the most important speech in galactic history. He thought about all the refugees he had met and all the stories of destruction he had heard. Tomorrow he would stand before the Galactic Council and announce that humanity refused to watch civilization collapse. The galaxy was about to discover what humans had learned from their own difficult past. The emergency meeting began early in the morning when most of the galaxy was still asleep. Bad news had arrived during the night that made everyone rush to the council chambers. A whole star system called Nexar Prime had disappeared from all communication networks. The last message received was a panicked distress call about a bright light approaching their sun ambassador. Hyun-woo entered the Great Hall wearing his formal diplomatic uniform. The blue and white colors of Earth stood out among all. The different alien clothing styles. Minji walked beside him, carrying a sealed case that contained information no one else in the galaxy had seen. Her hands were steady, but her eyes showed the weight of what was about to happen. The circular chamber buzzed with frightened voices as representatives tried to understand what had destroyed Nexar Prime. Some thought it was a new type of bomb. Others wondered if the Vorthan Empire had finally finished building their star-killing weapon. The holographic displays showed empty space where 5 planets used to orbit their sun. Everything was gone as if it had never existed. Beltar stood at the center podium with his crystal body dim and flickering. He had just received word that 3 more of his people's mining colonies had been attacked. The Krellix Federation was no longer bothering to capture the mines. They were simply destroying everything to prevent their enemies from using the resources. His voice cracked as he spoke about entire generations of his species being wiped out. The fear in the room was thick enough to touch representatives from 40 different species, sat in their chairs looking helpless and defeated. Some were already preparing evacuation plans for their homeworlds. Others were discussing which empire they should surrender to in order to avoid complete destruction. The great alliance that was supposed to protect everyone had become a gathering of the terrified. Ambassador Zephyr of the Aquilian Federation stood up with tears streaming down his blue-scaled face. His government had made the decision that broke everyone's heart. They were going to surrender to whichever empire reached their territory first. His people's beautiful ocean worlds would become military bases, but at least some of his species might survive the war. The announcement sent shockwaves through the chamber. The Aquilians had been one of the strongest neutral powers. If they were giving up hope, then maybe resistance was truly impossible. Other representatives began whispering about following the same path. Surrender seemed like the only way to prevent total extinction. Hyun-woo rose slowly from his seat. His movement was calm and deliberate, drawing attention without making dramatic gestures. The nervous chatter in the room gradually died down as delegates noticed the human ambassador walking toward the central podium. Most expected him to announce that Earth was also preparing to surrender, or perhaps to flee to another galaxy. Voice carried clearly through the chamber's perfect acoustics as he began to speak. He acknowledged the fear and desperation that had brought the galactic community to the edge of collapse. Everyone was terrified and running out of options. The systematic destruction being carried out by both warring empires threatened not just individual worlds, but the basic idea that different species could live together peacefully. The delegates listened with growing amazement as Hyun-woo presented evidence that went far beyond anything they had seen before. Minji activated holographic displays that showed detailed analysis of both empires' military operations. The data revealed that the Vorthan Empire and Krellix Federation were not just fighting each other anymore. They were deliberately targeting neutral populations. The evidence was overwhelming. Both empires had made lists of species that needed to be eliminated to prevent them from potentially helping their enemies later. The attacks on neutral worlds were not accidents or collateral damage. They were part of a calculated plan to reduce the galaxy's population to a manageable size for whoever won the final victory. The proof came from intercepted communications, captured by human intelligence networks. While other species had focused on defending their own territories, humanity had been systematically gathering information about war crimes. The documents showed orders to destroy cultural sites, eliminate civilian leadership, and relocate populations to work camps. Hyun-woo's voice remained steady as he described what the galaxy was really facing. This was not a war between two empires fighting for control. It was a campaign of genocide designed to reshape the entire galaxy according to the victor's vision. Billions of innocent beings would be killed not because they had chosen the wrong side, but because their continued existence was seen as inconvenient. The turning point came when he revealed intelligence about the superweapons both empires were developing. The devices were not just capable of destroying planets, they could destabilize entire star systems, causing chain reactions that would make vast regions of space uninhabitable. The next phase of the war would make previous destruction look minor by comparison. The chamber fell completely silent as Hyunwoo explained that these weapons would be used within months, not years. Both empires were preparing to demonstrate their power by destroying major population centers. The targets included homeworlds of species that had tried to remain neutral. The message would be clear: submit completely or face extinction. Some delegates started crying. Others sat in stunned disbelief at the scope of the planned destruction. A few began making emergency calls to their governments to warn them about what was coming. The reality was worse than anyone had imagined, and there seemed to be no way to prevent the approaching catastrophe. Then came the moment that would be remembered throughout galactic history. Hyunwoo looked directly at the assembled representatives and spoke the words that changed everything. He announced that humanity could no longer stand by while entire civilizations faced extinction. The Earth government had made the decision to enter the war, but this was not a decision to support either existing faction. Instead, humanity was creating a third option based on the protection of civilian populations and the restoration of galactic law. They would fight against both empires to create safe zones where species could survive until a real peace could be negotiated. The chamber erupted first in stunned silence, then in chaotic discussions, as delegates tried to process what they had just heard. A species that controlled only 37 star systems was declaring war against empires that spanned thousands of worlds. It seemed like diplomatic suicide, but something in Hyunwoo's calm confidence suggested otherwise. Minji began distributing data tablets containing detailed military analysis that showed both empires were weaker than they appeared. Their forces were overextended across too many fronts. Their populations were war-weary, and their supply lines were vulnerable. The illusion of invincibility was just that, an illusion maintained through terror tactics. The final shock came when Hyunwoo revealed that human fleets were already in position throughout the galaxy. While everyone else had been paralyzed by fear, humanity had been preparing for this moment. The intervention would begin immediately with operations to protect threatened civilian populations and establish secure territories, as delegates struggled to understand the implications of this announcement. Emergency communications began flooding in from across the galaxy. Human ships were appearing near refugee camps and threatened worlds. The species that everyone had dismissed as too small to matter was about to prove that courage and determination could overcome seemingly impossible odds. Within hours of Hyunwoo's declaration, the galaxy erupted into chaos. Emergency communications flooded every network as governments tried to understand what humanity's decision meant for their own survival. The news spread faster than wildfire, jumping from system to system as species leaders held urgent meetings to decide how they should respond to this unexpected development. The Vorthan Empire's reaction came swift and brutal. War Speaker Thane appeared on screens across the galaxy, his massive armored form filling the holographic displays. His voice boomed with rage and contempt as he dismissed humanity as foolish children who did not understand the reality of galactic warfare. He announced that any human vessels found in contested space would be destroyed immediately without warning. Thane's speech was filled with threats and promises of destruction. He described humans as pirates and terrorists who had no right to interfere in the conflict between superior civilizations. The Vorthan military would treat Earth's intervention as an act of war against the Empire itself. Human colonies would be targeted for complete elimination to teach other species the price of defying Vorthan authority. The Krellix Federation's response was more calculated and therefore more frightening. Prime Tactician Nith delivered their official statement with cold reptilian eyes that showed no emotion at all. She expressed curiosity about what had given such a small species the confidence to challenge powers that controlled thousands of star systems. Her words carried subtle threats wrapped in diplomatic language. Unlike the Vorthans, who reacted with immediate anger, the Krellix began analyzing human capabilities to understand if there was something they had missed in their intelligence reports. Nith hinted that negotiations might be possible, if humans were willing to explain their true objectives and reveal what secret advantages they believed they possessed. Back on Earth, President So-young addressed the Global Assembly in a speech that was broadcast to every human colony and allied territory throughout their space. She explained the moral reasons that had driven their decision, drawing comparisons to historical moments when smaller nations had stood against seemingly unstoppable aggressors. The human population responded with mixed emotions. Some humans were terrified at the thought of their small civilization challenging empires that could destroy planets. Others felt proud that their species was finally taking a stand for what was right. Many remembered stories from Earth's history about brave people who had fought against overwhelming odds to protect innocent lives. The decision felt both frightening and necessary. Admiral Tejo began implementing the secret military strategy that had been developed over many months. Human fleets emerged from hidden positions throughout the galaxy, revealing a level of preparation that shocked both enemies and potential allies. The ships carried new weapon systems that combined human engineering with innovations learned from studying other species' technology. The first engagement happened near the Altarian border, where Krellick's forces were preparing to destroy another mining colony. Captain Yejin's squadron appeared without warning and disabled 3 enemy warships before they could fire a single shot. The precision of the attack amazed everyone who witnessed it. Human weapons seemed designed specifically to counter the energy systems that both empires relied on. Captain Dongmin's humanitarian fleet shifted from refugee assistance to coordinated evacuation operations, working with local resistance groups and sympathetic military units. Human forces began establishing safe corridors that allowed civilian populations to escape from areas marked for destruction. The operations required perfect timing and exceptional courage. The evacuations were conducted under constant threat of attack from both warring empires. Human ships would appear at threatened worlds, load as many refugees as possible, and disappear before enemy reinforcements could arrive. The rescued populations were taken to secure zones that humanity was establishing. In previously neutral space, intelligence reports began flowing in, as both the Vorthan Empire and Krellick's Federation started testing human defenses to assess their real capabilities. The initial skirmishes revealed that human military technology was far more advanced than anyone had suspected. Their defensive systems could neutralize the energy weapons that had given the major empires their reputation for invincibility. The balance of power in the galaxy was shifting in ways that military analysts struggled to understand. How had a species with only 37 star systems developed technology that could challenge empires spanning thousands of worlds? The answer lay in humanity's approach to warfare, which focused on efficiency and innovation rather than overwhelming force. General Minho coordinated with allied forces from civilizations that had decided to support humanity's intervention. The coalition started small, but grew steadily as news spread about successful operations to protect civilian populations. Each victory demonstrated that the warring empires could be challenged, effectively encouraging other species to reconsider their assumptions. The Altarians, led by Veltar, were among the first to offer formal support. Their crystal cities had been saved from destruction by human intervention, and they provided valuable intelligence about Krellick's military movements. The Zenari followed soon after, offering their advanced medical facilities to treat wounded refugees and injured human soldiers. Smaller civilizations that had been abandoned by their homeworld governments began reaching out to human commanders asking for protection. Some offered resources and industrial capabilities in exchange for security. Others provided strategic locations for establishing forward bases. The coalition was becoming a legitimate alternative to surrender or extinction. The galactic news networks struggled to keep up with rapidly developing events. Military experts who had dismissed human capabilities were now scrambling to understand how such a relatively small species had managed to develop effective counters to weapons that had dominated space warfare for centuries. The war was entering a completely new phase. Both the Vorthan Empire and Krellick's Federation found themselves facing something they had never encountered before. Human tactics avoided direct confrontation with massive fleets, instead focusing on disrupting supply lines, liberating prison camps, and providing evidence of war crimes to populations that had been cut off from independent information. The psychological impact was enormous, as human forces demonstrated that the seemingly invincible empires could be defeated. Human commanders made a point of avoiding civilian casualties while their enemies continued policies of total destruction. The contrast became impossible to ignore, even for populations living under strict information control. 3 months after the declaration, the strategic situation had transformed beyond recognition. The human-led coalition controlled secure territories around 17 star systems, providing refuge for millions of displaced beings, while actively challenging both empires' ability to expand their zones of destruction. The galaxy was discovering that determined resistance could work. Emergency sessions of various planetary governments debated whether to join the growing alliance or continue trying to appease the warring empires. The success of human operations was inspiring species that had given up hope to reconsider their options. The choice was no longer between surrender and extinction, but between surrender and fighting for survival. As reports of human victories spread throughout the galaxy, the psychological momentum began shifting. Neither the Vorthan Empire nor Krellix Federation could maintain their image of unstoppable force when a much smaller civilization was successfully protecting the very populations they claimed were impossible to defend. The war was entering its most dangerous phase. 1 year had passed since Hyunwoo stood before the Galactic Council and changed the course of history. The galaxy looked completely different now than it had during those dark days when extinction seemed inevitable. The human-led coalition had grown from a desperate gamble into a powerful force that controlled safe territories throughout known space. Admiral Taeho's fleets now protected 43 star systems that had become known as the Sanctuary Worlds. These planets operated under revolutionary principles that amazed everyone who visited them. Instead of claiming conquest rights or demanding tribute, human administrators worked with local populations to rebuild their societies based on cooperation and mutual respect. The Sanctuary Worlds had become beacons of hope in a galaxy that had forgotten what peace looked like. Refugees who had fled with nothing but the clothes on their backs were now living in newly built cities. Children who had never seen their homeworlds were learning about their cultures in schools that celebrated diversity rather than demanding conformity. Captain Yejin had become a legend throughout the galaxy for her precise military operations that always avoided civilian casualties. Her tactics manual was being studied by military academies on dozens of worlds. Species that had never worked together before were learning to coordinate their forces using human-developed strategies that emphasized protection over destruction. The war between the Vorthan Empire and Krellix Federation continued in distant systems, but it no longer threatened to consume everything in its path. Both empires had discovered that they could not expand their territories, while human forces actively opposed them. The galaxy had found a third option that actually worked. Captain Dongmin's evacuation operations had saved over 50 million beings from certain death. His fleet had perfected the art of appearing at threatened worlds, extracting civilian populations and disappearing before enemy forces could respond. The rescued beings often spoke of human crews who risked their lives to save people they had never met. The breakthrough that changed everything came when human forces liberated a secret Krellix research facility hidden in an asteroid field. The documents found there revealed the true scope of the superweapon programs both empires had been developing. The weapons were not just planet killers, they were designed to destabilize entire regions of space. The research showed that both empires had been planning to use these devices to create dead zones that would separate their territories from neutral space. The weapons could trigger chain reactions that would make star systems uninhabitable for thousands of years. The scale of planned destruction was beyond anything the galaxy had ever imagined. General Minho coordinated the release of this information to populations throughout both empires. The revelation that their own governments were willing to make vast areas of space uninhabitable sparked rebellions on dozens of worlds. War-weary citizens who had supported the conflict began demanding answers from leaders who had hidden the true costs of victory. The turning point in the war came when human forces successfully defended the Zanari homeworld against a massive combined assault by both empires. The battle lasted for 6 days and showed that Vorthan and Krellix forces were no longer capable of the overwhelming attacks that had previously guaranteed victory. During the defense of Zanari Prime, something unexpected happened. Vorthon and Krellic soldiers began surrendering to human forces rather than continuing to fight. Many were exhausted by years of endless warfare and had lost faith in leaders who seemed willing to destroy the galaxy to achieve victory. The successful defense encouraged dozens of previously neutral civilizations to join the alliance, bringing military resources and industrial capabilities that had been desperately needed. The coalition was no longer just about survival. It was becoming a legitimate alternative government for species that wanted to live in peace. President So Young announced the formation of the Galactic Protection Alliance during a ceremony that was broadcast throughout human space and allied territories. Representatives from 67 species attended the founding conference, each bringing their own ideas about how civilized beings should treat each other. Ambassador Hyunwoo was appointed as the alliance's first Secretary General, a position that would coordinate diplomatic and military efforts across the growing coalition. His first speech focused on the principles that would guide their work: protecting civilian populations during conflicts, ensuring the right of species to govern themselves, and helping threatened civilizations defend their territories. The alliance established new rules for how wars should be fought. Cultural sites were declared off-limits. To military operations, civilian populations could not be deliberately targeted. Prisoners had rights that must be respected. The concepts seemed obvious, but they were revolutionary in a galaxy that had forgotten such basic decency. Intelligence networks throughout both empires reported growing unrest as populations learned about the alliance's successes. Many Vorthon and Krellic worlds were quietly negotiating with human representatives about switching sides or declaring neutrality. The empire's grip on their own territories was weakening as their citizens demanded better treatment. The economic impact was enormous as well. Trade routes that had been closed for years were reopening under alliance protection. Planets that had been isolated by the war were once again able to exchange goods and ideas. The galaxy's economy began recovering as fear gave way to cautious optimism about the future. Both the Vorthon Empire and Krellic Federation were forced to redirect massive military resources to defend their own territories against rebellions. The external war that had consumed so much of their attention was now competing with internal conflicts sparked by their own citizens' demands for peace. The final scene returned to the Galactic Council chambers, where Ambassador Hyunwoo addressed the assembly. For the first time since his historic declaration, the room was fuller than it had been in years, with representatives from species that had thought they might never see their homeworlds again. His speech focused not on humanity's role in changing the situation, but on the collective effort that had proven civilizations could work together to protect their shared values when beings cooperated instead of competing, when they chose protection over conquest, when they valued life over territory. Amazing things became possible. The principles established by the Alliance had become the foundation for a new era of galactic relations: the protection of innocent life during conflicts, the right of species to determine their own futures, and the responsibility of advanced civilizations to help those threatened by aggression. These ideas, born from humanity's own difficult history, were reshaping how the galaxy thought about war and peace. The war continued in some distant systems, but it no longer threatened universal destruction. The galaxy had learned that even the smallest voices could make a difference when they spoke with courage and determination. Humanity had achieved something that seemed impossible. They had created hope where there had been only despair. Looking toward the future, the Alliance represented more than just military success. It proved that different species could work together to solve problems that seemed impossible when faced alone. The galaxy would remember this as the moment when cooperation triumphed over conquest, when protection became more important than power, and when a small species taught everyone that courage could overcome any odds.